Nice to see you today, Allison. How are you?
Nice to see you as well. I'm good. I think I'm already going to lose my voice from South by.
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
It'll do that to you. Either I lose my voice at South by or yelling at my kids. Let's start with brand. Brand is the topic today. And I'm always talking about kids and brand. My daughter's a gymnast. She started off her gymnast career doing really great at bars. And we started to call her Bars. Last week, she didn't do so well at bars, and she said she wanted to change her nickname from Bars. And I said, that's not quite how brand works. And I looked at you, right? You've been one of the 50 most influential women in marketing, top 10 women in digital. You've been a contributor to Adweek and AMA, so you've done a really strong job of building your brand over time. And now you work for an amazing company, Visa, who has a great brand. And we see the top 50 strong brands being really strong in the marketplace. They contribute and exceed S&P 500 and NASDAQ. And now we've seen Visa for 10 years in a row continue to be a top 10 global brand. I have a simple question. How do you do it?
Well, I don't do it. I mean, so personal brand, I don't know that I really have the answer in terms of how I grew into that, other than I think I had some really smart mentors. Years ago, actually, I had my own Facebook page, and then, friends and family. And then I was thinking about it, I'm like, do I need to set up a professional Facebook page? And my mentor said, are you different at home than you are at work? And I thought about it, and I was like, well, no, I'm kind of the same awkward person both places. But it was an interesting thought of separating your work and your personal life. I am protective of my personal life, but I did start to think about my personal brand down to really nerdy things. Like I use my middle initial, Alison Herzog, and I do it with intention 2 different ways. One, you actually gain more credibility if you do use your middle initial. And as a female, I have to think about every single detail. Every detail. The other one, and I'm going to say this works for LinkedIn, is if people use automated messaging, I know every single time because it says, hey, Allison J, come do this thing. And I'm like, you didn't even take the time, dude. Sorry for that tip. But so I do think about that. And then the Visa brand is just amazing. And I cannot take credit. I am part of it. I have some of my team here. They are part of it.
Go Visa.
It's a lot of really smart people working hard together and understanding the psychology of how people work and recognizing that brand preference means that there's less price sensitivity. It means that you're more loyal, which I think is that much more critical, in macroeconomic challenges.
I like the tip around middle names. I hope there was note taking there. Great jewels. When we think about brands, we also think about building brands through communities. At LinkedIn, we see really high loyalty, high engagement, high brand followership when we build communities and we have engaging conversations with those communities. At Visa, how do you guys think about building communities around your brand?
There's a lot of different ways that we build community, and it can be anything from our employer brand, employee brand, to the way that we build community. I'm on the B2B side, so acceptance solutions within Visa. We help businesses accept payments, prevent fraud. And there is a community of people who are like-minded. I certainly like to come to these types of events because I get to meet other people in my field and I get to learn from them. So you have that community of how do you make people be experts in finance who wouldn't otherwise be experts in those types of things, and you build that community of helping people grow in their career. And on the employer branding side, it's the community of loving where you work and having a culture of kindness, of empathy. We have it in my team right here. They've done something called a social contract, which I love. They studied what is it like to have a positive work environment? What does that look like? How do we treat each other? How do we have accountability, but the right type of accountability where it's not shameful, it's making sure we're helping each other. So it's all those pieces of community where we find common ground, we lift each other up, we're helping each other with whatever resources we have. That's how you build community.
Appreciate that. I really like the social contract that you guys have out there. There's this social concept of social selling. There's the concept of thought leadership. Sometimes that comes through community and sometimes that comes through normal employees. We see from Edelman's research talks about 65% of buyers really, really appreciate thought leadership when companies have that. They think that's a good thing. 72% of leaders think it's also good for companies to have an active voice on a social platform. How do you all think about thought leadership and promoting thought leadership for Visa's brand?
The reality is if you don't have a point of view, you just blend. And if we care about brand and performance marketing, we can't afford to blend. And that's one of the reasons why Visa is so successful, because it has a point of view. Even down to social issues are a really big deal to me. I want to work for a company that stands for something. I've probably gotten myself into trouble at every company I've worked at from an HR perspective. I probably shouldn't say that, because if I don't think something's right, I say something. And something I love about Visa, Al Kelly just retired in the role that he had. But man, that guy, anytime there was some sort of wrong happening, he stood up and said, no, this is not okay. Visa's going to use the power it has to do something about it. Even down to, when Black Lives Matter, when there was so much terrible stuff happening, all in such a condensed amount of time, a lot of companies say they do lip service. But I don't believe something till I see money and action. And so Visa actually did put money behind it. They have a Black Scholars program. So I get to be one of the mentors at Visa. There's 50 of us that they select, those who are early in college, and they match you and you get to be a mentor to somebody who's just starting out, doesn't really know what they want to do, and lend your expertise. And it reminds me of, oh my gosh, what was it like to be 18? I have to try to remember what that felt like, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, I thought I did, but no, I didn't. But it's those types of things of standing for something and putting your money where your mouth is and your action. It just makes all the difference in the world.
I love that you guys took a strong stance, and I love that you continue to build your brand organically. You just follow what's right and what's purposeful. And I think a lot of employees are doing that. There's a number of ways that companies are trying to figure out how to humanize their brand through their employees. What are some of the things you guys are doing to humanize your brand using some of the employees at Visa?
So we don't have one of our social people here, but our head of social, we have one of our social media manager who works out of our Austin office as well. They do a great job of how do we get the faces behind our company into, LinkedIn is really our bread and butter because we are B2B. How do we get those people in front and center, so you see their faces? Because ultimately people buy from people. So you do want that thought leadership, but the thought leadership has to come from someone with that point of view. And then it's stronger when there's a personal connection. And so having employees be in front, there's an amazing social influencer program that Diana Unai on my team has created, and it lifts up both executives, but also those who are experts in their space. So it doesn't matter what level you are in the company, it's are you knowledgeable? And by elevating them and creating that connection point, we're able to create thought leadership and sell more effectively. And one thing we've used at LinkedIn actually is we use personal invitations. So you use that sponsored content to reach people's in-mail. And when we do webinar invites, we've been sending it from a person. And we see a much higher rate of return than when it was something more generic. And so again, it's that personal connection that suddenly we see incredible performance because it is from a human being and it is humanizing the brand. Again, people buy from people.
I think it's a good call out you talked about, which is making sure that the people who you are leveraging to drive thought leadership truly have knowledge. And that's a danger because there's a lot of influencers. There's a lot of a creator. My kid thinks he's an influencer and he's not. So how do you decipher who's a part of that voice that you amplify when you go for it?
I was thinking about this last night because I'm a nerd and I lie in bed when I'm supposed to be sleeping and my brain does not shut up, commonly known in my place of work. And I was thinking about there's nothing that drives me more crazy than something that's pretty but empty. And that means, maybe that sounds terrible now that the conversation we were just having, but I was thinking from a product perspective, you don't want to buy something that sounds amazing. Marketing can only do so much. We can make something sound amazing, but if the product is empty, then it's shiny, but meaningless. If, on the other hand, you have an amazing product, but nobody knows about it, and there's no strong brand, then you also have a problem. So if we're talking about thought leadership and influencers, it is knowing who in your company, at the end of the day, has the expertise and won't be hollow, will be able to have the conversations, whether it's technical or strategic, and have it be meaningful. So I was thinking about that of not having shiny but empty. It has to be something that is known and meaningful and connects and has something behind it.
Pretty but empty. I'm going to take that one back. That's a really good line. Today, we are in a very difficult time for some brands, only because of the economy is sort of challenging. They say, I don't know where I got the stat from, but I'll find it. Somebody can Google it. They say only for board members, 3% of them have marketing experience. So when you are trying to solicit budget during tough times, when you are trying to have a conversation and convince the CFO or partner with the CRO, how do you do that effectively? How do you tell that story in a convincing way that brand matters? We saw, I think, 89% of marketers after a survey of 2,000 people said that 89% of them believe brand was valuable in the short term. 90% believe brand is valuable in the long term. But they ranked it 20 in their brand priorities and their budget priorities. So help me understand how you position, brand as valuable to your leadership.
I think this is one of the struggles marketing always has. And every time I have somebody who wants to do just some questioning around, hey, we have a conference coming up. What are the topics we should talk about? Regularly, I bring up, how do we have our conversations with our COOs, our CFOs, our CEOs on proving value as marketing? Because it's a problem. And the shiny but empty came from somebody who'd shared a meme, and it was like different animals representing different parts of the business of like, I think we were a dog and it didn't make sense. Sales was a fox.
I'm concerned about that, babe.
The foxes are cute, so it's fine. That was inappropriate.
Hopefully there's no rabbits. And
awkward.
Hopefully the dog was big and there was no rabbits.
I think it was a husky, but it was all these different things. But it's one of those, like, marketing gets this bad rap as we're shiny but meaningless, and we're not. Because if people don't know who you are, then how is sales ever going to have the conversation? If you have a great product but nobody knows about it, how are you going to sell it? And so from having the conversation with your executive team of getting budget, it's using language that they understand. And I had one of our SVPs in sales say to me, like, I don't want to learn marketing. And she had a great point. She doesn't need to take, at this point, 25, 30 years into her career to learn marketing. So what I need to do, which is my job anyways, is to learn how to speak the language that she speaks, that our C-suite speaks, which is in money, which is in basic terms. It's not impressions. It's not talking about reach or things like that. It's just using plain speak, which is, again, my job in marketing, to use regular people language. So if you translate things again into regular people language and the benefit they get and that funnel it creates, then they start to listen.
So you're a professional translator as well, is what I heard. And I believe many of you have probably gone through that, being a translator in this space. It's an interesting space because from B2B and B2C, often the approach is different. I'm not sure that it should be, but we know that from a B2B perspective, often sometimes brands think about positioning the widgets and the facts. Meanwhile, B2B has done a really great job of provoking emotion, driving memory, and inspiring. So how do you think about B2B, because you've spent time in B2B and B2C, how do you think brand leaders should be thinking about B2B marketing?
So I remember when I went to Dell Technologies, which is where I was before Visa, I had a moment of panic after I'd been hired because I felt confident going in. I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I actually feel ahead of the curve with a lot of this. And then I was sitting at my desk and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know B2B marketing. I'm so screwed. I'm in genuine moments sitting at my desk like, I'm a fraudster. Like, this is imposter syndrome happening. But again, I'm selling to people. So even though it's B2B, it's still, I'm selling to a person. The thing I love about our business is we both sell to small businesses as well as really big businesses. Small businesses are near and dear to my heart because of the stories, because of the mom and pop stores through COVID, like how we were able to help them. It's really beautiful. B2C, and even in the small business piece, it's very transactional. It's a lot faster. On the B2B side, our sales cycles are like 18 months. So we have to be sticky. We have to create memories. We have to create that thought leadership, or when somebody is actually in that buying time, which is like 5%, then we're not going to come to mind and we're not going to be somebody on the list. So I think that's the difference, is that B2C can be highly transactional, faster sales cycle, which again, like I love the SMB side because it's still storytelling. It's just faster, which also means attribution is a lot easier. But B2B is a longer sales cycle. So you have to build that trust over time so that you are on the list and top of the list when they are ready to buy.
It's a really good point. I think people often forget that memory and that moat that you build around your brand is very important. And that 5% of the time people are in market, and the other 95% you have to cultivate that. And you've done a really good job of doing that wherever you went. Now, the question I have is, what advice would you give future marketers who's looking to join the same path that you've joined?
Sorry, the future path, I didn't catch the last word.
What advice would you give future marketers who are looking to follow your footsteps in the future?
I think one of my greatest pieces of advice is to be curious. You need to always be learning. You are never done learning. I learn things all the time. I also know that I will never be the expert at everything. And as a type A person, I think that was hard to accept at one point in my life. But I have an amazing team, and I rely on them. And I tell people, put it into kindergarten terms for me, because there are things I just know that it's about having trust and being curious and asking a lot of questions and recognizing your limitations as well. So ask a lot of questions, be curious. That works internally for your career. It also works for the people you're trying to sell to. But I think curiosity and a desire to learn constantly is what gets you in the door and staying in the door and ready to move on when the time is right for your career.
I appreciate that. Now, I think we're going to take a few questions from the audience before we wrap here.
I'll show your mic for a second, sorry.
Hi, Alison. I'm Ashwin from Samba TV. A question about how you're thinking about the brand in an environment. In the last 72 hours, we've seen Silicon Valley Bank fail. About 6 months ago, we saw FTX, a crypto exchange, fail. And in the crypto movement in the last 5 years, there were the seeds of distrust in traditional finance and banking. And I was just curious how that influences you from a branding and marketing perspective, what that sort of calls on you to do from a brand perspective.
Gosh, that SVB news yesterday, it shook us all. I know people who worked there, and I mean, it was just poof, gone in an instant. I'm really interested to see what happens in the coming months, frankly, because so much of tech's money was there. It's a really big deal. How do we come through these things? I think Visa has done a really good job of having longevity as a brand. And Frank Cooper, who's the CMO, he's come in with a fresh perspective. He's, continuing to learn and ask questions. So I think it's building longevity as a brand, but also recognizing that there are always chips in the armor. and asking questions, creating a place where your employees can also poke and find the chips so that you fill them as you go. And looking for what's next, but also recognizing the right way to invest in the risks. Crypto is so interesting. I will admit to still not understanding it.
Yeah.
Just gonna put out
Good
there.
for you for admitting it.
I'm just
I have a related.
still trying to understand crypto and Bitcoin, and I mean, I understand it, but I still feel a little dumb in it. But I just think, again, chips in the armor always exist, and I think what happened yesterday just shows nobody's exempt, and we just all have to constantly be asking questions and also being there and empathetic when our fellow colleagues and fellow businesses experience something so extreme like yesterday.
Can I pass along? Sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, Alison. Tim from BBC. I wanted to ask you, I'm a big believer in brand, actually, and globally, there are often times where your brand has to show up in quite a challenging place, and I think about the Football World Cup recently, and I just wonder, can you share your experience? You talked about social contract with employees. How do you deal with the challenges that come from the fact that you're going to move forward with the brand showing up in a space where it might not necessarily be favorable to everybody?
It's a great question. I don't think we can ever get every single thing right. But I think, again, that's where listening and there's some other, I belong to Chief, which is an executive women's network. And there's been some conversation happening around that right now. And again, it's about being inclusive and asking questions and being able to say, I'm wrong. I'm not perfect. It also means sometimes people are going to like the decisions you make. And when I was younger, I got mad sometimes because I thought, like, why is so-and-so doing this thing? And I didn't have all the information. And so I think every single person, whatever level you're at, you have to be willing to ask questions, recognize that you don't know everything, and willing to listen to be told you're wrong or there's a different perspective. And sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. But it's, again, willing to recognize that you're fallible.
How do you balance as a B2B marketer, as we over-rotate on education and sometimes fall short of memory and inspiration? How do you find the balance of being the responsible brand that educates people about financial literacy or financial fluency, but also exciting them along the way? How do you find that balance? What's that process for you when you talk to brands and agencies about what you expect from content?
So we have to be pragmatic to get the job done in order to have the time to ideate. I do believe, I'm not great at this, but I do believe it's important to build in your own day some time for brain space or some time in your week. I'm in a lot of meetings, so it's really tough for me, but I lay in bed and overthink and have all the best ideas at 3 a.m. It's seriously the worst because you're like, I know I should be sleeping, but I'm also gonna have my best ideas right now, so I don't know what to do. But I think it is those types of things that you have to consider in order to have success. So
I'm going to give one more question. Sorry.
Hi, Alison. Nima from Wellbe Live. We're a personal branding and talent management agency. I'm really curious, just given LinkedIn being front and center here, there's a lot of new features being launched in the coming quarters, thought leader ads being one of them. B2B play, obviously, where people buy from people. Wondering how you see Visa as an organization protect the authenticity of the individual employee while also put the best foot forward for Visa as a brand.
I think it's about hiring the right people. I have very little patience for arrogance. I have very little patience for people who are not kind, for people who don't know what they're doing and are unwilling to learn how to do the thing. So I think it does come down to hiring the right people in order to have their personal brand be strong and be 100% there as a company to lift them up, to build them up, and be willing to give them a platform, because ultimately they do represent the company, and that is something. When I was at Dell, we built this huge employee ambassador program, and we have something similar at Visa as well, but there's so many, at Dell at the time we had 180,000 people. So you think about how every employee has the opportunity to be an ambassador, to be a voice for the company. And I mean, I believe in paid media. I have paid media that sits with me. But man, that's a whole heck of a lot of reach. That's free because you're still paying them salaries. And, we do the same thing at Visa. There are voices, there are ambassadors. But if you don't hire the right people, then you do have to worry. If you hire the right people, you don't have to worry. You teach them, you train them, but you don't have to worry.
I think that's a good end, because the next group is going to talk a little bit more about leading with authenticity and empathy. So thank you guys so much for your time. We really
Thank you,
appreciate
Alison.
it.
Thanks, guys.